Amazing session, Jemima. Thank you so much for joining us. We're now going to be jumping into a panel discussion about content strategy. How do you create content that is socially immersive, entertaining, but also shoppable for Gen Z? So joining me on stage, I've got some amazing people from various brands and agencies. So I guess, welcome everyone. Sascha, Holly, Natalie, did you want to go around and introduce yourself and tell the audience a bit about what you do?
Shall I kick off? So I'm Sascha Driver. I'm the digital editor for Hits Radio, which is basically a fancy term for I'm the social media manager. Our presenters include Sam Thompson, who you might know from I'm a Celebrity, the biggest bundle of energy in the world, and Fleur East and Gemma Atkinson. So we work with a lot of talent, create a lot of content around kind of the music that's been released, but also film and television content as well.
I'm Natalie Turner. I'm from Kentucky. We are the world's leading youth travel brand. So we organise group tours and trips for 18 to 35s, whether or not they're coming with a mate, on their own solo. They've got a group and an organised trip where we organise all of their excursions, accommodation, travel as part of that trip. And before I worked in the travel industry, I've been working in the fashion industry. So my last role was for Calvin Klein, doing all of their marketing across the UK.
And I'm Holly. I'm Chief Commercial Officer of Little Dot Studios. We're an agency, social media management agency, working with organisations across entertainment, so studios, streamers, TV channels, sports, so a lot of rights holders within the sports industry, and consumer brands, working on development of content for social media, audience growth, organic channel management, etc., paid media, and also monetization through shoppability, etc.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm sure we will get straight into it, but yeah, I'm excited to be hosting this session as well. My name is Harriet McCulley, and I'm a B2B marketing manager here at Pion. So I guess the name of the title is Think Like a Broadcaster. The first question I have down here is, what does it actually mean for brands to think like broadcasters? And Natalie, I'll come to you first.
Thanks. I think if I just go back a second, when I first started my career, you were looking at a channel that was like you had two channels to talk to your consumers, and you were very much focused on like your brand messages and what you wanted them to buy into. And these days you've got a multitude of platforms that you're talking to a consumer, and you're selling them a lifestyle. They're buying in, they're following you for this brand and the authenticity of the brand. So it's not just about like who you are as a brand and what you want to push. You're telling them a story and you're bringing them on a journey. So for me, it's really about like finding that way of engaging constantly with a consumer and not just giving that brand content, talking to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything to add, Sascha, Holly?
I completely agree. Obviously, as a radio station, we broadcast so many people on air, but on social, it's all about your audience, and also just thinking about what your audience are getting from that content. So how are they going to engage with it? How are they going to react to it? We always say we don't want to post things unless you feel something when you post it, whether it's any sort of emotion, and also just offering a variety of content, I think, is so important in this day and age.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, I agree. I think there's kind of an unprecedented opportunity for brands in the kind of last 5 years, that there's an opportunity to own, not rent your audience. So, you know, instead of having to use a third party like an influencer, not that we're against that at all, or a media owner, actually you have the opportunity to build these channels on your own terms and build your audience and engage your community yourselves. And obviously that has a long tail impact. You know, you can keep talking to those people rather than having one interaction through a kind of paid impression, etc. So yeah, own, not rent, that's one of our mantras.
I love that, I love that. I think obviously things are constantly changing with Gen Z as a demographic. Like, it's very hard to stay on top of all the trends that are coming about. But I guess if you were to think about maybe the top 2 or 3 trends that I guess are landing with Gen Z nowadays, what would you kind of say they are? Holly, should we start with you?
That's a big one. I mean, I think ultimately, I'm going to be the first one to use the word authentic, because I think someone's got to go there first. I do think ultimately people want to interact with a brand on social media the same way they want to interact with anything else on social media. They want to enjoy the content, then they want to engage with the content. And so our big policy really is like, have fun, create content that you're going to enjoy. Don't, exactly to your point, Natalie, like don't think about the brand, but kind of think about the engagement of the community first, and then you know, how do you ladder that back to your brand? I mean, I think, yeah, ultimately we're working in a world where people are watching 2 screens at once. They're engaging, you know, with something on the television at the same time they're on TikTok, or they're, you know, it's about understanding context and creating for that context. So yes, there are trends around really, really short form video. There are trends around, you know, challenges. There are trends around kind of actually engaging with each platform on its own terms and creating content. But I think the big overarching trend is really understanding where your audiences are and then creating content for that context.
Nice. Go on.
I was going to say, I would completely agree with the authenticity. I think that's probably one of the biggest trends that we've seen, and we've really shifted our content to make sure that it is more authentic. Like, even to the extent now, when we go and do brand shoots, we won't use models, we use our past passengers to kind of really engage with that audience and really show that authenticity. But I think the next one that I would probably add, without stealing your authentic thunder, is the humour aspect of it as well. And just kind of making sure that you're really engaging with the consumer in that humorous way and kind of giving them that content that makes it shareable as well. You kind of can relate, but you find it funny at the same time.
I will just quickly add to that, on the back of what Eva said, we live by the real filter at our work, so it's real, entertaining, authentic and live for the radio side of things, but it's basically everything you two have just said. It's all about real authenticity and making sure they feel something when they watch that content.
Nice, yeah, I think authenticity is probably the word of the year. Like, I've heard that at every single Gen Z conference or everything I'm reading at the minute. Coming to you, Sascha, obviously you mentioned you're in the entertainment industry. There's a big focus on kind of staying culturally relevant and staying on top of that with your content strategy. What do you do, or like what tools are you using? What's your strategy for kind of keeping on top of that?
I think a lot of you will probably relate, if you work in the social media landscape, that you feel like you have to be online 24/7. And don't get me wrong, at one point in our careers, we've probably all been like that. But I think there's a lot of healthier ways now to work with it. So from a team perspective, we kind of obviously always online and we are keeping track of what's happening. But it's also important to remember that we all have completely different feeds, different algorithms, we're all served different content. So whilst I might see a trend, my team might not have come across that trend yet. So we're always flagging things to each other. And we work with a much wider network as well to make sure all of the content we're being served is kind of going out to our wider audience. And there's also some brilliant trend forecasters, especially on the likes of TikTok. If you just search kind of predicted trends or what's happening on TikTok or through the search tools, you can find some really good accounts, and that's amazing for us finding trends. We often kind of get a heads up when we have big talent coming in, and then we can plan ahead the kind of content we want to do with them. But if we say, get asked if we want to film a TikTok with, say, Ed Sheeran, we will look at what is either trending that week, if it's that week when it's happening, or we'll kind of plan in advance, because as we all know, trends come and go so quickly. So yeah, I just think the one thing I want to get across is don't feel like you have to be online 24/7. Like, look at the tools out there. Later.com are great as well at doing kind of trend reports week by week of what's happening, what sounds are trending. The platforms also offer amazing newsletters too.
Nice. Have you guys got anything to add, I guess, from an agency perspective? You've probably got lots of various different tools to monitor all your clients.
Yeah, we do, and a lot of them are great. I agree, the platforms are a really good resource. I think, exactly to echo you, I think each other are a really good resource. You know, we all know how accurate the algorithms are. However hard I try and escape my, geriatric millennial self, they follow me, they find me with the content. And so ultimately, I think you need to pool what you're seeing and share trends. So, I mean, we have, Inspire Me Slack channels. We are constantly trying to share stuff we've seen so that we can make sure, and obviously we're in a really privileged position where we're working with a lot of different clients at the same time, so we can kind of highlight work that we've done too. I do just want to echo the point around work, balance in this space, because it's so challenging, and particularly in that point that you're trying to, not only are you trying to create work for yourself or for your clients, but you're also trying to inspire yourself and keep creative and keep on top of a very fast-changing landscape. I'm almost at the point of kind of reinstalling TikTok every Monday and uninstalling it every Friday at this point, because I'm like, I need it, but I can't be on it as much as I want to be on it. So yeah, I don't have the answer, sadly, but I do think that is a really good point for us to all keep reminding ourselves that it is important to maintain that balance. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think on the trend front as well, I'm seeing a lot of brands like going to AI. So there's like trendhunter.ai is like a great one where it just like spits out loads of trends at you for like the daily kind of roundup of what's trending within the Gen Z kind of landscape, which is a great one. Coming back to you again though, Sascha, obviously your content strategy covers a lot more than just radio. How do you kind of balance content that's specifically for radio, but then translating that into social media?
So it's really interesting because this is the most relevant question for me in my career right now. When I started out, which was about 7-8 years ago, I was literally brought in as a social producer to basically mimic what the radio station were doing on social. Whereas now I feel like there's such a shift in businesses finally understanding social, not necessarily all the way as much as we probably do, but they see the relevance of it, and they're also now giving us bigger budgets to work with. We've also noticed kind of with artists that we work with and talent they are now more keen to give us extra time, whereas back in the day you would get 10 minutes for a radio interview and that's all you could do, whereas now we might get 30 minutes to be able to do a feature with them and the radio content and then TikToks and everything else. So I just think there's a real shift at the minute, and I'm very lucky in my company that we are really being pushed now to do more social first content, because it's actually what a lot of the key talent and the artists want to do more of. They love sitting and talking about their song, but that's all very much a tick box. They want to get into the games, have some fun. So I think it's a really exciting time at the minute. I think outside of my business, other businesses I've spoken to as well are kind of really pushing that more now. So I'd say to everyone, keep championing your social first content and just keep pushing it, because yeah, it's doing really well for us.
Nice. Coming to you, Holly, I guess from like a campaigns perspective that you've worked on, kind of touched on there about like repurposing content. What's, I guess, the strategy or the tips that you have for people that are looking to kind of repurpose content across different platforms, whether it's social, email, whatever it might be?
Yeah, I mean, we have a kind of unique perspective on repurposing content because we work with quite a lot of entertainment companies who, I guess, have a huge archive. So we work with some of the big streaming companies who have kind of their entire archive of TV shows that they can use on these platforms, and their challenge, which is a challenge, is to recreate that as kind of fan-led social first content. So how do they take what exists and then make it a meme, basically? And that's a privilege but also a challenge. I mean, I think the one thing I'd say about that is people do want to, like, we see over and over again, people do want to watch like old content. So we work, for example, with NBC Universal, who obviously own The Office and own those shows that are kind of 20, 25 years old at this point, but people cannot get enough. And so obviously not everyone has The Office, but not just writing off, oh, that was from a while ago, we can't do something with it again. Like if it was funny a while ago, it's probably funny now, or it could be funny now. And I guess that has given us a perspective to kind of the broader challenge of how to, you know, sweat content, how to make sure that content is used as far as and wide as it can. And so we're always kind of adopting that principle as it relates to production. So when you're going into production, trying to create content for as many platforms as you can at the same time. I will say, I think there's a word of warning on that, which is that they are so different. And so if you know, like, I don't think the principle of I'll make a long video for YouTube and then just create cut downs for TikTok is the right approach for most brands. It's like you really want to be creative for TikTok because it has such a strong vocabulary and it has such a strong like humor of its own that is very different from a cut down. But equally, if you have the opportunity to create, you know, take an idea and see how it could extend out to YouTube, or it could work on Instagram, or it could work on TikTok, then take that opportunity. Yeah, I think that ultimately we all have constrained resources and budgets and stuff, so making content work as hard as possible is a really important principle. Some of it works, like you can put a TikTok out as a YouTube short, and it probably, if it works on TikTok, it probably will work on as a YouTube short. But yeah, not always the case. So it's kind of making sure that you prioritize your platforms and then play to their strengths as well as sweating the content.
Nice. And I guess the audience is kind of slightly different for each platform as well. Like obviously if you're a big brand, you've got a quite like targeted audience, but it is going to be different on TikTok to like the people that you're targeting with like emails or even YouTube. Natalie, coming to you next. Can you tell us about Kontiki's approach to kind of a channel-led like strategy and what that looks like for your content?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've kind of already touched upon it in just how you repurpose it. It's remembering that the consumer's at a different point of the journey as well, at different points of the channel. Even in our social platforms, at TikTok, they're discovering us half the time because it's the way that the algorithms work. But whereas our Instagram channels, we've actually got more of a brand-aware audience. But then in our email, they're probably already considering us and looking to book a trip. So it's like making sure we're tailoring that message at the right time. And also, I think you can repurpose the content, but it's just like altering that story arc, whereas before you do a hero film and you'd lead up and you'd have that big build up and that big moment at the end, and it's always like that was what was worth watching for. With social and TikTok, you're kind of changing that story arc. You've got to have that hook and that big moment at the beginning and the content afterwards. So we kind of really make sure when we're looking at that channel-led approach, like what is that content, what is it like attending for, who is that audience that we're looking at, to make sure that we deliver it and it's gonna get the engagement that we want, and we're pushing the right message, and like what's that purpose for that particular thing. Like it doesn't always have to go across. There are people that will kind of go, all right, let's go for our shopping list of marketing channels, and they're like, right, so I've done this campaign and here we need an email and then we need a social post and this is it. And it's like, actually no you don't, because it's not relevant to the consumer at that point. And I think it's making sure that you kind of always have that in the back of your mind when you're looking at that campaign and driving it forward.
Nice. I think, yeah, we've spoken about social media a lot today. Even the past 2 talks were both about TikTok. I guess I want to know, like, is it all about TikTok? Like, what are you guys prioritizing? Holly, should we come to you first?
Yeah, I mean, it isn't all about TikTok. It is obviously a lot about TikTok, but it isn't all about TikTok. And I think the platform that we work on a lot, but I think does get lost in the mix a little bit when speaking about Gen Z specifically, is YouTube. And actually, I was looking at some stats earlier. This isn't about Gen Z specifically, but I think it is worth bearing in mind that in the US, 66.5% of adults are on YouTube and only 23.7% of adults are on TikTok. So just in terms of the sheer scale of the opportunity that YouTube represents, it is huge. There is a higher barrier to entry for YouTube, and I think that puts a lot of brands off, which I actually think is completely understandable, because ultimately we all know if you're going to be on a platform, you've got to do it right, and it is harder to produce longer form content for YouTube than it is potentially to create content for TikTok or Instagram. That said, I think I referenced YouTube Shorts earlier, and I do think that is an emerging opportunity to get on the platform as part of a content plan, but get on the platform without the same kind of investment that maybe a kind of 10, 15 minute, 20 minute long video requires. But yeah, I think it is a huge audience opportunity, and we have a lot of data. We do 9 billion views a month on YouTube, we do 9 billion views a month in total, but a lot of those are on YouTube, and Gen Z are there, 100%. And they're not just there, they're watching for 2-3 hours at a time, sat there, while scrolling on TikTok on their phone, basically. And so I think remembering it as a platform and figuring out how it fits in your content matrix and your platform planning is really important. But equally, it is a prioritization exercise, and TikTok is a huge opportunity as well.
I would also agree. It's not all about TikTok. I think it's easy to forget and think it's all about TikTok. It's the latest social media. Oh, we've got to get this, or how do we win around like this part of it? And yes, it's probably one of the latest social media platforms that has really hooked and really got that gravitas behind it. But I think it's about building up your whole channel ecosystem and how you talk to the consumer. And I think sometimes you can get so focused on what you're putting on TikTok or what you're putting on that you forget who you are as a brand and that authenticity that you've got to kind of build up in that brand message and make sure that you're still promoting the same brand message essentially and who you are across the board. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think it definitely helps us tap into that Gen Z audience. And from a travel side of things, obviously we can put content out that people are inspired by, even if they're booking their own travel trips and not necessarily a critiquing, outrageous if they're not, but but we can kind of use that as a discovery platform to bring them in and reach that audience. But ultimately, I think you've got to give that equal weighting as well to other channels.
I'll just add to that as well. Also, don't forget about Instagram Reels. I think everyone's obviously just shifted straight to TikTok and kind of forgotten about Instagram, but we have seen such a surge in engagement at the minute in video views on Instagram Reels, especially around, for example, Bridgerton is huge at the minute. Obviously, they've just released the first 4 episodes. We did some content on Instagram as a test. We did it on TikTok and it performed well, so we thought we'll try some clips on Instagram as well. They got higher engagement than they did on TikTok. Getting our platforms mixed up. But yeah, basically, Instagram Reels are just amazing at the minute. And I think people almost forget about them a little bit now with TikTok, but I've also actually, just from speaking to other people, especially in Gen Z, I think people are feeling TikTok burnout a little bit because it feels like sometimes all we do is sit, I'm guilty of this, we sit and scroll for hours and hours and hours. So people are actually going back to just scrolling on Instagram a little bit more and they're digesting a bit more content that way. So I think, yeah, as Lisa said as well, YouTube is huge for us, but agreed, it comes with budget and it's a lot of time to put into it. But it's definitely not all about TikTok.
Our highest engagement actually is Instagram over TikTok. So it still continues to perform for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think on, I guess the subject of, you mentioned certain trends and stuff there and what's working. Holly, I'm keen to understand a bit more about what's working on TikTok for your partners, what's trending, what can brands take away from today that they need to get on their TikTok accounts?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We're seeing some, quite traditional mechanics work on TikTok, even though it's obviously a very Gen Z cutting edge, giveaways are working massively well for some of our brand clients on TikTok. And it's pretty lo-fi, and it works. People love free stuff. And so, we've been playing into that a little bit. Obviously, again, and we were all saying it earlier, but the humour piece is just huge. And so even if you're going to do a giveaway, you've got to make it funny somehow. It can't just be, here's some free stuff and follow us and like and subscribe and we'll give you, And so what's the angle on it? Humour, I mean, it's easy to say it and it's hard to do, but it is the most important thing, is being funny on these platforms, and being funny in the way that people who are engaging with your brand want you to be funny. It's interesting, so Little Dots existed for like 12 years and I've actually worked there that whole time, which has been a big roller coaster in terms of the social platforms. And we used to, when we're creating content, we used to kind of take a budget and split between content ideation and production, and it would probably be kind of like 25% in favour of content ideation, and then the rest of the budget goes to creating the content. And now you're almost flipping that. It's like actually the ideas are what matters, coming up with really, really good ideas that aren't necessarily complicated, but you spend time on researching them and working out what they are and how your audience is going to engage with them. And then the production can just be so much more lo-fi. Our offices are actually on Brick Lane, and we shoot a lot of stuff around here. Like we just, film on a phone and create the content. But that doesn't work if the idea is no good, but it does work if the idea is good. Keeping it lo-fi, keeping it authentic, and then playing into that humour. We bring a lot of people in to create content who love these platforms. You need to know it's embarrassing if someone tries to come up with ideas that doesn't spend their life on these platforms. So I think it's that as well. It's like, how do you make sure you're staying ahead of the trends, I guess.
I think, I'm seeing a lot of uncut content, especially with creators that have been working with brands. Anything can go viral, even the finance bro, I'm looking for a guy in finance, that's trending and it's going everywhere. Sorry, and brands jumping on that trend and it's working. So I guess you just never know what's going to work. We've spoken a lot about TikTok, so let's move on to YouTube. Coming back to you again, Holly, but how are you seeing kind of younger audiences? I know you said they've always got it on in the background, but how are they kind of engaging with long form content? Let's dive into that a bit more.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a myth that they don't. So it's our kind of assumption that people aren't watching long form, and then actually, we're busting that myth, but actually none of our data indicates that. People in every demographic are watching YouTube for long session times. And actually the rise of living room viewing for YouTube is unbelievable. So they actually, in terms of living room viewing to YouTube, they've actually beat Netflix every month for the last 12 months. So they are technically the biggest streamer in the world in terms of people watching the platform on televisions. And so when you're watching something on television, you're not probably watching short form, you're probably watching long form. And so I think that's a really big white space for brands. It's one of our clients is a big sportswear retailer, and we work with them to produce creator-led formats on their channel that actually are basically TV formats. So they're 20, 25 minutes long, creator-led, really fun and really YouTube first, but that length, and they're working incredibly well. We make probably six of a format at a time, and so you can watch it back. You can watch them all in one go, or you can watch them one by one. But we see a lot of session times where people are watching all of it in one binge session. And like I said before, there is a barrier to entry for that, and you need to have forward-thinking execs in your company who see the opportunity and invest in it. But when it goes right, it's such a big opportunity, and that's like having you basically have a TV channel that is reinforcing your brand and speaking to your demo. And actually, it's not that expensive compared with having a TV channel. Actually, having a TV channel. So yeah, I think that living room viewing surge on YouTube is a huge opportunity for brands if they can get it right. And also, I think that whole people only want to watch 3-minute videos isn't true of any demographic that we see, and certainly isn't true of Gen Z.
Yeah, nice. I like that. I'm going to come to you now, Natalie. Can you tell us a bit about the campaign that you've got launching later this year, and I guess how you've kind of worked to capture that kind of 8-second attention span of the younger generation?
Yeah, absolutely, without giving too much away. We're looking at trying to do something disruptive, essentially. We're doing a travel-first industry experiment with some influencers. But it'll be something that kind of cuts through that noise and kind of makes you think about it in that sense. So that is one aspect of that, and I think it's about being disruptive, making sure that you kind of aren't just kind of repurposing content to a certain extent. Obviously, you do, but like making sure that you're kind of coming through with new ideas and new aspects as well, and kind of twisting and evolving the brand. But alongside that, if you look at our campaign and kind of how we're trying to deliver it at more of a granular level, it all ladders back up to that same message, but we have got it going in like different formats. So if something hasn't engaged with the consumer, the same message is going to go out to them, but in a different way. So we've got 6 or 7 different formats of trying to promote that same message. So if we haven't captured them in that 8 seconds, hey, here's another one that you can try out. Like the image fatigue isn't there. So it's really about kind of how we capture that attention, making sure that we're kind of creating that breadth of content that will live across different channels. And as I said earlier, making sure that it's tailored to each channel and it's relevant, because we don't want to put something out on the wrong channel that isn't never going to engage, and we've kind of lost them at that point too.
Yeah, certainly. And I guess when it comes to like the end of the campaign, hoping it's a great success, how, I guess looking at like the reporting side, how are you going to prioritise metrics? Like from a brand perspective, keen to hear what you guys prioritise in terms of metrics, but also coming from an agency, like what do you report on? Should we start with you, Natalie?
Absolutely. I think for me, or for us, it's about looking at those core KPIs. Like you can get so caught up in the detail of, what's this KPI? How much reach did it get? Like, and you look at the granular, and it actually doesn't mean anything when you take it out of the context from it. So it's looking at like your top line. Did it increase brand awareness? Like, and looking at, there's multiple ways now that you can look at that. Did it increase traffic to your site, or what's the engagement rate of it? Has it increased like conversion as that point? And kind of really looking at them at the top level. But I think for me, you can base them on those KPIs, but it's about bringing out the insights from the campaign that aren't just, oh, this is the result. That's the result, and what? Like, what have you taken from it? What have we learned? What that means, that difference? So it's more about pulling those up, because that's what you're going to take through to the next campaign. Obviously, you can then benchmark against your top level KPIs and show that it was a success to your like board, but you need to make sure that you're pulling out the metrics that are going to be able to develop further.
Nice. Anything to add?
Just from a brand point of view, obviously we have to report on all analytics, but the one thing we really look at is kind of the video views versus the engagement, because you can have videos that have an amazing amount of views, but then the engagement might be like quite low. So we always try and identify why that is, or sometimes vice versa. We have insane engagement and the views aren't as big as you think they would be, which is always a great thing. And also just looking at kind of shares and comments, especially with comments, like people have taken their time out to comment and interact on that video. So I think it's also really important to make sure you're replying to them. Easier said than done, I know, because again, it can be a hefty job trying to reply to all those comments every single day. But if you can, try and get in there, because then that person feels like they've been brought into your brand more and you're engaged with them, and then they're likely to follow you and stay in touch with the brand and follow what you're doing.
Yeah, I would echo engagement, and I think broadening the definition as well of engagement from like shares, comments to kind of watch time. So how long are people staying with your video, particularly, you know, or are they staying in your environment as well? Are they watching another one of your videos after they watch the one that they've just watched? And then I think I completely agree. The ability to drive impact is kind of one of the best things about social. So I think exactly broadening out the KPIs to how has this met our goals, whereas we can be guilty of getting quite insular about just how do you grow the channels, but when it comes to growth, I do think engagement is probably our core. There are a lot of ways of defining it, but I think that's what we want to do. And I guess also, like, if you're in some of the platforms that have click-throughs, then click-through rates. So how are people seeing the impression and then clicking through, or stopping rather than scrolling. So yeah, I think that's probably our core one.
Nice. I think we kind of answered the final question a little bit there. But I guess a lot of brands, smaller brands as well, like there's a big desire to go viral. Like, should brands be prioritizing that? And if they should be, like, how do they achieve that? Should we start with you, Sascha?
Yeah, I'll start by saying I hate the word viral, I'll be completely honest. I think, you know, we've probably all been in meetings where someone big up in the company has said, this needs to go viral, and immediately it's just a no. I try and shut down anyone that ever says that, because as most of us know, the content that goes viral is the content you're least expecting to go viral. So I think it just adds an extra layer of pressure when you're doing content. So I think, like I say, if you get content that goes viral, always try and analyse it, try and work out why, and you can obviously try and recreate content in a similar aspect that might also do the same thing. But yeah, I don't think it should be a focus to go viral. It should just be a focus on the quality of the content and what you're producing, rather than that need for X, Y, Z amount of views, because it's just not realistic, and it adds an insane amount of pressure on everyone.
I totally echo that. No, there is no need to focus on just going viral. I think you start losing the brand authenticity and those key messages that you want to push. And going viral a lot of the time, as you said, always the least unexpected, and it becomes a happy accident. Because we have posts that still a year old, and we can log into our TikTok account and they're still generating likes, and you're like, well, why is that? And it's just because something else has picked up on it. And I think you could spend so much time focusing on what that viral bit is, and I completely get why you're trying to you shut down that conversation, because it becomes the focus and you get too caught up in the detail. But at the same time, I think you need to make sure that you're staying reactive and you're looking for those trends and those moments. And you touched on it earlier where you said that you've got like a Slack channel with we have the same. We have a reactive social Slack channel and reactive content and what we want to jump on. So it's making sure that you're kind of staying relevant is probably the key, rather than focusing on being viral.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all going to agree on this one. I think it's just so true, because also you can look at a piece of content that has gone and, like you say, continues to go viral. So many of our clients, the same video will stay in the top for a year without really any explanation, and it just keeps going and going and going. And you could put out the same piece of content like a week later and it wouldn't happen. And so the sitting there trying to kind of overanalyze what it was about that piece of content that meant, and how do we do it again, it actually is a distraction from how do we make really great stuff that people are going to engage with. And, exactly like you say as well, it's potentially, you really want incremental engagement with your demographic and the people who are going to engage with your brand. And so even if you get 50 million views, are they 50 million people that you want to actually be talking to, or are they just people who have looked at it and then gone on their way? So yeah, I think focusing on quality content, focusing on engagement and incremental growth is the key. And then there may be moments, exactly, especially if you stay reactive and you make stuff you love, then there may be moments where it goes wild. And I have to say that's my favorite thing about TikTok. Like, I just love it. As a bit of an analytics nerd, it's just like, why? What has driven this? But it's almost like the more you want it, the less likely you are to get it. So yeah, I'd say just focus on the goal and it might happen.
Yeah, I love that. It's all about trial and error as well, I guess. So that actually rounds up the panel discussion. We've got a kind of like 5-minute buffer for any questions. So opening up the floor, is there any questions from our audience?
Hi, thank you. That was super helpful. We've spoken about TikTok, Instagram and YouTube. I think one thing we've not spoken about is Facebook. It's obviously not dead. They're trying to get Gen Z back on the platform. I'd just be really interested to hear from you all about how you're using Facebook, if you've seen any success there. It's something I struggle with my clients. It's kind of always forgotten. It's always put on the back burner. But I think especially with video, it's a huge kind of goldmine.
To kick off, we actually do use Facebook quite a lot, just because with our audience, our radio station is directed at 30-somethings, but we also do go out to a lot more of a younger audience. But on Facebook, we find a lot of kind of our family-related content, a lot of our real content is really well in there. We have especially 2 presenters who talk a lot about like dating disasters and parenting nightmares. That content absolutely flies on Facebook. And I think it's recently, the past few days, Facebook have now kind of integrated all of their video systems into one, whereas before they had like loads of different pages. It's now just all onto one in the Reel player. So I think definitely don't forget about Reels on Facebook. We don't necessarily prioritize them over TikTok and Instagram. Those are our priority platforms, but Facebook is great for tapping into those audiences. And for us, the 30-something audience especially does really well on there.
Facebook is definitely not something that we forget about either. But it's just different part of like the funnel with the consumer. We tend to find that Facebook for us actually works better as a conversion piece. So it's when someone is at that point versus that discovery. We don't tend to find it works in the discovery mode. So it's just adapting that content. But actually, when people have booked their trips, we have something that isn't run by us, but is very much established, is the Kentucky Travel Lounge. And all of our pass packs have conversations in this Facebook group about the travel and the aspects, and so many interesting insights that we can really gather from them. So it is still very much a strategy, but I think it's changing that and where who the consumer is, and not just repurposing what you put on TikTok and Instagram Reels and Instagram and then Facebook as part of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is an opportunity. We also work a lot on Facebook, but I think it's the trickiest to nail down, particularly as it relates to Gen Z, like how are you approaching them there. But I do think they're at a really interesting inflection point, exactly like you said, Sascha, where they've just integrated the video player to be the same as Reels across Facebook, which is a different interface for users. They're watching video in a different way, and that way is a lot more like Instagram and TikTok, which obviously is how Gen Z kind of want to watch video, at least in that context. So I think it is at an interesting moment. And I think we probably need to have the next year or so play out in terms of their ability to attract new audiences. Cargo pants are back. I feel like Facebook can come back. It's like Gen Z might discover it. It might be like cool and retro. But yeah, I think video is key. Well, certainly for us, we're pretty much a video company, so I guess I would say that. But I would say having a video component of your Facebook strategy is a key thing. And yeah, I do think that it's kind of an inflection point where it could really go, or it could kind of stay as it is now, which is reaching a certain demographic and doing so really well.
Any other questions from the audience?
Sorry, I was just thinking on, as you were talking about Facebook and videos, whether you think it's better to post a video directly in Facebook or link out to your YouTube if you're trying to build up your YouTube.
Yeah, we would always say post natively. These platforms kind of don't love each other, I would say, and so they are pretty much programmed to deprioritize links to the other platforms. That's based on my experience. I don't speak for the platforms. I'm sure they would say that's not true. But yeah, our experience is definitely it's always best to post natively. I guess the only exception to that is probably Instagram and Facebook, a little bit less so because they're obviously owned by Meta, so they don't have that deprioritization as strongly in our experiences as other platforms. I would still say if you can, it's a different demographic and it's a different reach. So posting natively is the first and best option. But if you want to cross post between Facebook and Instagram, then that's probably the best one. Putting YouTube links on Facebook, I probably wouldn't say is the right one.
I was just going to echo exactly that. Yeah, their platforms themselves, we sit down with them a lot, and they always say, don't put links in your Facebook copy in general, but especially to other platforms, because, yeah, they're all out to get each other.
Thank you guys so much. We've got time for one more question, if there is one. Got one here at the front.
Hiya, just a question about YouTube Shorts. Do you find it works better kind of using them to link to longer form content or just as like standalone videos?
So we were really hoping when they launched YouTube Shorts, it was going to be like a funnel to YouTube. Like we were like, okay, cool, great, we can create some little cut downs and then we can link to our YouTube videos and everyone's going to do that. And unfortunately, we just haven't seen that user behavior. And I think it kind of does make sense when you think about it, that people are there and they're watching in a certain way. They're not ready to take that huge jump to a like non-vertical video. So the best success we've seen is a short strategy and a YouTube strategy. A YouTube main. I saw it referred to as longs the other day, and I was like, that doesn't work for me, but we need a word for YouTube non-short. But so having a kind of just short strategy and then your YouTube main feed strategy. There obviously is halo effect of growing an audience on shorts to your YouTube channel. And by the way, I would advocate for shorts. Like we're seeing, it took a little while to get going, but we are really seeing growth there. So, if you're not doing it, I do think it is a really good opportunity. But yeah, we're not seeing quite that kind of direct click-through conversion. And there is a slightly different language, again, of the two. So it's kind of how do you make one for shorts and then kind of have a different kind of format for YouTube. But yeah, I think that would be mine.
Cool. Thank you so much to our audience and to you guys as panellists for joining us for the digital marketing track. We are now having a coffee break until 11:30 when, if you want to join the Future of Work track, it's in here. So yeah, thank you so much.